I followed my husband to what I thought was his friend's house. Instead, I watched him unlock a door to another life, another home, another woman, another family. My name is Rachel Torres, and I'm a dental hygienist. I thought I knew the man I'd been married to for 8 years, but I was living half a truth, the lie that started everything. The first time I noticed something was wrong, Marcus kissed me goodbye on a Saturday morning and said he was heading to poker night with the guys. It was 10 in the morning. I remember thinking that was strange, but I didn't say anything. I just watched him grab his wallet and keys, whistling as he walked out the door like he didn't have a care in the world. "Have fun, honey," I called after him, forcing a smile. He turned back and grinned. "Always do. Don't wait up. Don't wait up." For a poker game that apparently started before lunch, I stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the street, and something in my chest tightened. It wasn't the first time he'd left for these Saturday gatherings, but it was the first time I really paid attention. When he came home that night, I was waiting on the couch. He walked through the door around 11, and I caught it immediately. The smell. Not cigars or beer or the musty scent of Mike's basement where these games supposedly happened. Lavender. Sweet, floral, distinctly feminine lavender perfume. "How was poker?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Great, I won $50. He kissed the top of my head and headed straight for the shower. I sat there in the dark, my mind racing. The next morning at breakfast, I tried a different approach. "How's Mike doing?" "I haven't seen him in forever." Marcus's fork froze halfway to his mouth, his jaw tensed. "He's fine. Why?" "Just wondering, maybe we should have him and his wife over for dinner sometime." "Mike's busy. He's got a lot going on right now." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm going to be late for work." He left his breakfast half-eaten on the table. I stared at the abandoned plate, my heart pounding. That defensiveness, that quick exit, those weren't the actions of an innocent man. That afternoon, while Marcus was at work, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into our online banking and started scrolling through our statements. At first, everything looked normal: groceries, gas, utilities. Then I saw them. ATM withdrawals every Saturday from a Wells Fargo branch in a neighborhood I'd never heard of. 43 miles away, $200 each time. My hands shook as I zoomed in on the location. Maple Grove. I pulled up Google Maps and stared at the street view of an unfamiliar suburban area with tree-lined streets and perfect little houses. Why was my husband withdrawing cash there every single week? Something in my gut twisted. A primal instinct that screamed danger. I knew, even before I had proof, that Marcus was hiding something massive. And I knew that next Saturday, I wasn't going to let him walk out that door without finding out exactly where he was going. The house on Maple Street. Friday night, I told my sister everything. Carmen listened on the phone, her breathing getting heavier with each detail I shared. "Rachel, you need to follow him," she said firmly. "I'm serious. Take my car." "He won't recognize it." "What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid?" "Then you'll feel silly for an afternoon and you'll know your marriage is solid." "But Rachel," she paused, "you're not wrong. I can hear it in your voice. You already know something's not right." Saturday morning came too fast. Marcus kissed me goodbye at 9:30, same as always. Same whistling, same casual lies. The moment his car turned the corner, I grabbed Carmen's keys and my phone. My hands trembled so badly I could barely start the ignition. I stayed 3 cars behind him on the highway, my heart hammering against my ribs. 40 minutes later, we exited into Maple Grove. The neighborhood was beautiful: oak trees, manicured lawns, children's bikes lying in driveways. It looks like a postcard of suburban perfection. Marcus turned onto Maple Street and slowed down. I pulled over 2 houses back and watched as he turned into the driveway of a cheerful yellow house. A plastic playhouse sat in the front yard. A tricycle lay on its side near the porch steps. Wind chimes hung from the eaves, catching the morning light. My husband got out of his car, and I watched him reach into his pocket. Not for his phone, for keys. He had keys to this house. He didn't knock. He didn't ring the doorbell. He walked up to that front door like he owned the place and let himself inside. I sat frozen in Carmen's Honda, my vision blurring with tears I hadn't realized were falling. The rational part of my brain screamed that there had to be an explanation. Maybe he was house-sitting. Maybe this was actually Mike's house and I'd gotten confused. Maybe, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. I waited. 2 hours passed. I couldn't move, couldn't think, could barely breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. What's happening? I couldn't answer her. I just stared at that yellow house, watching shadows move behind the curtains. At one point, I saw him through the living room window. Marcus, my husband. He was laughing, his head thrown back in that carefree way he used to laugh with me, back when we were first married. Then someone else moved into view, a woman with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was laughing too. My stomach lurched. I fumbled for my phone and opened the camera, zooming in as much as I could. My hands shook so violently that the first few photos came out blurry, but I kept trying. I needed evidence. I needed proof that this nightmare was real. Finally, at noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I started the car and drove away, my whole body numb. I didn't remember the drive home. I only came back to myself when I was sitting in our driveway, staring at our house, the house I'd thought was our only home. How long had this been going on? How many Saturdays had I waved him goodbye, believing his lies, the other family? I couldn't sleep that night. Marcus came home at his usual time, 11 o'clock, smelling like lavender and lies. He kissed me on the cheek and headed for the shower, and I pretended everything was normal, even though my entire world had just collapsed. Sunday morning, I told him I was going to visit Carmen. Instead, I drove back to Maple Grove. I parked down the street from the yellow house, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like some kind of amateur spy. I felt ridiculous and desperate and absolutely determined. At 10 o'clock, the front door opened. Marcus stepped out onto the porch, and my breath caught in my throat. He was wearing the same outfit he wore when we went to the park together, jeans and that blue Henley I'd bought him for his birthday. He turned back toward the house and held out his arms. A little girl came running out. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with dark curls bouncing around her face and a bright pink dress. Marcus scooped her up and spun her around, and I could hear her delighted squeals even from where I sat. "Daddy, higher! Daddy!" The word hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The woman from yesterday appeared in the doorway. Up close, even from a distance, I could see she was beautiful. Younger than me, maybe late 20s, with an easy smile and confident posture. She walked up to Marcus and kissed him. Not a friendly peck. A real kiss. A wife's kiss. They looked perfect together. The three of them stood on that porch like a stock photo of the ideal American family. Loving father, devoted mother, adorable daughter. Meanwhile, I was the idiot wife sitting in a borrowed car, watching my husband live a completely separate existence. They loaded into Marcus's car, the car I'd helped him pick out 2 years ago, the car we'd driven on our anniversary trip to Napa. The little girl climbed into a car seat in the back, a car seat. He had a car seat installed in our vehicle. I followed them to a nearby park. I stayed in my car while they played on the swings and the slide. Marcus pushed his daughter on the swings, higher and higher, while the other woman took photos on her phone. They looked so happy, so natural together. I raised my phone with shaking hands and started taking pictures. Every angle, every moment, Marcus helping the little girl across the monkey bars, the woman kissing his cheek while he held their daughter. All three of them sitting on a park bench, sharing what looked like French fries from a paper bag. My husband had another family, a whole other life, and I'd been completely, utterly blind to it. When they finally headed back to the car, I'd taken over 100 photos. My phone storage was nearly full, but I didn't care. I had evidence now, undeniable, devastating evidence. I drove home before Marcus could, my mind spinning with questions that made me physically ill. How long had this been going on? Did he love her more than me? Was our entire marriage a sham? And that little girl, she was 4 years old? 4? That meant she'd been born while Marcus and I were married, while I was still believing every word he said. The evidence I collected, Monday morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't imagine sitting in the dental office, cleaning teeth and making small talk while my life was falling apart. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started searching for divorce attorneys. That's when I found Diane Moss. Her website specialized in cases involving fraud, hidden assets, and infidelity. Her profile photo showed a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that said she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. Perfect. I called her office and somehow got an appointment for that same afternoon. When I walked into her downtown office, she took one look at me and pointed to the chair across from her desk. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. I showed her the photos, the bank statements, the timeline of Marcus's Saturday disappearances. By the time I finished, Diane was leaning back in her chair with her fingers steepled under her chin. Rachel, I'm going to be very direct with you. What you're describing sounds like bigamy. If your husband is legally married to this other woman while still married to you, that's a felony in this state. But before we go nuclear, I need to know for sure. I have an excellent private investigator who can dig into this. How much? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. $5,000 for a comprehensive investigation. But trust me, if what you're telling me is true, you'll get every penny back and then some. I used the credit card Marcus didn't know about, the one I'd opened years ago for emergencies. This definitely qualified as an emergency. The investigator's name was Patricia, and she worked fast. Within a week, she had a full report sitting on Diane's desk, and I was back in that office, my hands clenched in my lap. It's worse than we thought, Diane said, sliding the folder across to me. Marcus has been married to Christina Valdez for 6 years. They got married in a small ceremony in Nevada. He used his middle name and his mother's maiden name on the marriage certificate, Marcus Daniel Hendricks instead of Marcus Allen Torres. 6 years. My hands shook as I opened the folder. There were copies of the marriage certificate, photos of Marcus and Christina at their wedding, property records showing the house on Maple Street purchased under an LLC called Hendricks Family Trust. He owns that house? I managed to ask. Through a shell company, yes. It's in neither his name nor hers directly, which suggests he's been very deliberate about hiding assets. The little girl's name is Emma. She's 4 years old, born while he was legally married to you. And here's where it gets really interesting. Diane pulled out another document. Marcus has been funneling money from your joint accounts into this LLC for years. Small amounts, never enough to raise immediate red flags, but it adds up. We're talking close to $200,000. The room spun. 200,000? He's been stealing from you to fund his other life. The house, the car seat, probably Christina's expenses. It's all been coming from your marital assets. This isn't just bigamy, Rachel. It's financial fraud on a massive scale. I felt like I was going to throw up. What do I do? Diane's expression turned razor sharp. We destroy him, legally, thoroughly, and completely. But first, I need to know, do you want revenge or do you want justice? Both, I said, without hesitation. I want both. Confronting my mother-in-law. Before I could move forward with divorce proceedings, I needed to know something. Had anyone else known? Had Marcus's family been in on this secret, watching me play the fool for years? I drove to Eleanor Torres's house on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother-in-law lived in a modest, ranch-style home 20 minutes from us. She'd always been cold to me, but I'd attributed it to her being a reserved person. Now I wondered if there was another reason. Eleanor answered the door in her gardening clothes, dirt smudged on her cheek. Rachel, what are you doing here? Is Marcus okay? Can I come in? We need to talk. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or fear. She stepped aside and let me into her immaculate living room. Family photos lined the mantel, including several of Marcus as a boy. I noticed for the first time that there weren't any photos of our wedding. Not a single one. I sat down on her floral couch and pulled out my phone. I want to show you something. I pulled up the photos from the park. Marcus, Christina, and Emma looking like the perfect family. Eleanor's face went carefully blank as she looked at the screen. I followed Marcus to a house in Maple Grove, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I watched him walk in with his own key. I saw him with his other wife and his daughter. So here's my question, Eleanor. Did you know? The silence stretched between us. Finally, my mother-in-law sighed and set my phone down on the coffee table. I knew. Those 2 words hit me harder than I'd expected, even though I'd already suspected the truth. How long? From the beginning. He brought Christina to meet me about 6.5 years ago, said he'd fallen in love, that you two had grown apart. Eleanor's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. I told him he was making a mistake, that he should divorce you properly, but Marcus has always been stubborn. So you just went along with it? You watched him commit bigamy and fraud, and you said nothing? Eleanor's eyes hardened. Maybe if you'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. Christina is young, attentive. She gave him a daughter, something you failed to do after 8 years of marriage. The words hit like slaps. We weren't ready for children yet. We agreed to wait. You waited too long. A man needs a legacy, Rachel. Christina understood that. She made him happy in ways you clearly couldn't. Eleanor stood up, brushing invisible lint from her pants. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but honestly, maybe it's for the best. Marcus should be with the family that fulfills him. I stood too, my whole body trembling with rage. He's a criminal. What he did is illegal, and you helped him hide it. I protected my son. That's what mothers do. You enabled him to ruin my life. Eleanor walked to the front door and opened it. I think you should leave now. And Rachel, if you're planning to make trouble for Marcus, remember that family protects family. You were never really part of this family anyway. I left without another word, tears streaming down my face as I drove away. My mother-in-law had known. She'd known everything, and she'd looked me in the eye at family dinners and holidays, knowing I was living a lie. The betrayal felt almost worse than Marcus's. The sister who knew 2 days after the confrontation with Eleanor, I got a text from an unknown number. This is Valerie. Can we meet? I need to talk to you, please. Valerie was Marcus's younger sister. We'd always gotten along well, or so I'd thought. She was 28, worked in marketing, and had always seemed kind and genuine. Now I wondered if that had all been an act too. We met at a coffee shop across town. Valerie was already there when I arrived, hunched over a latte with red-rimmed eyes. She looked up when I sat down, and I saw genuine distress on her face. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. What do you want, Valerie? She took a shaky breath. I know about Christina. I know about Emma. And I know you know. Mom called me yesterday, furious that you'd confronted her. Did you know too? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Valerie nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. For 3 years. Marcus told me by accident. I came to visit him at work one day to surprise him for lunch, and I saw him with Christina and Emma at a restaurant across the street when I confronted him. He admitted everything, made me swear I wouldn't tell you. Why didn't you? Because he threatened me, Valerie's voice broke. I was in debt, Rachel. Student loans, credit cards, medical bills from when I had that surgery 2 years ago. Marcus had been helping me pay them off. He said if I told you, he'd stop helping me and I'd lose everything. I know that's not an excuse. I know I should have told you anyway, but I was scared and desperate and… She covered her face with her hands. I'm so sorry. I've hated myself every day for 3 years. I wanted to stay angry, but looking at Valerie's genuine anguish, I felt my rage deflate slightly. She'd been manipulated too, in a different way. Show me, I said. Show me everything you know. Valerie pulled out her phone and opened her text messages. She scrolled back years, and there they were, messages from Marcus. In one thread, he'd written, Rachel is the backup plan. Christina is my real life. Just need to keep both going until I figure out the exit strategy. The backup plan. I stared at those words until they blurred. There were more messages. Marcus complaining about me, saying I was boring and demanding. Marcus praising Christina for being easygoing and low maintenance. Marcus joking about how clueless I was, how easy it was to fool me. He's a monster, Valerie whispered. I see that now. And Mom's just as bad for enabling him. I should have been brave enough to tell you years ago, but I was weak. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I looked up at her. Are you willing to testify in court? To tell a judge everything you know? Valerie didn't hesitate. Yes, whatever you need. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Good, I said, standing up. Because I'm going to take Marcus down, and I'm going to take down everyone who helped him, including your mother. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of something other than pain. I felt power, I felt purpose, and I felt the cold, clear determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. Planning my revenge. Diane Moss looked impressed when I walked into her office with Valerie beside me. I'd spent the past week gathering every shred of evidence I could find. Bank statements, photos, text messages, property records, and now a witness willing to testify. This is remarkable work, Diane said, spreading everything across her conference table. With what we have here, we can not only dissolve your marriage, but potentially press as criminal charges. Bigamy, fraud, theft from marital assets. Marcus is looking at serious jail time. I want him to suffer, I said flatly. The way he made me suffer. But I want it to be public. I want everyone to know what he did. Diane raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? That's when I told her my plan. Eleanor's birthday was coming up in 2 weeks, a big celebration at her favorite restaurant. Marcus had mentioned it weeks ago. back when I was still living in ignorant bliss. The whole family would be there. I want to confront him there, I said, in front of everyone. But I want Christina there too. She deserves to know the truth about who she married. That's risky, Diane warned. Public confrontations can backfire. I don't care about risk. I care about the look on his face when his two worlds collide. I leaned forward. Can you help me contact Christina? Anonymously? Diane was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I can have Patricia reach out to her, present the evidence, let her draw her own conclusions. But Rachel, I have to warn you, this could get messy. My life is already messy. At least this way, I control the explosion. Over the next week, everything fell into place with surgical precision. Patricia contacted Christina, posing as someone conducting a background check for a job application. She presented Christina with evidence that Marcus Allen Torres was married to someone else. To me. According to Patricia, Christina's reaction was exactly what I'd hoped for. Shock, denial, and then fury. She'd had no idea Marcus was already married. She thought she was his first and only wife. Patricia arranged for Christina to receive an invitation to Eleanor's birthday dinner, along with copies of our marriage certificate and photos of Marcus and me together. I didn't want Christina to think she was the villain in this story. She was another victim, just like me. I spent hours with Diane preparing for what would come after the confrontation. We filed the divorce paperwork, ready to serve Marcus the moment the dinner was over. We prepared criminal complaints for bigamy and fraud. We even reached out to Marcus's employer, setting up a meeting for the day after the dinner to present evidence of his double life. Valerie came over to my house the night before the dinner. We sat in my living room, and she held my hand. Are you sure about this? She asked. Once you do this, there's no going back. I'm sure, I said. Marcus destroyed my life. It's time he faces the consequences. What about Mom? Your mother called me a failure to my face. She blamed me for Marcus's actions. She doesn't deserve mercy. Valerie nodded sadly. You're right. I just hope I'm strong enough tomorrow to watch it all fall apart. You will be, I told her. We both will be. That night, I barely slept. I kept running through everything in my mind, checking for flaws in my plan. But every angle was covered. Tomorrow, Marcus's birthday present to his mother would be the public implosion of his carefully constructed lies. And I would be there to watch the birthday dinner explosion. I arrived at Lombardi's Italian restaurant 30 minutes early, dressed in the black dress Marcus always said made me look powerful. Diane was already there, sitting at the bar with a clear view of the private dining room Eleanor had reserved. Patricia sat near the entrance, ready to document everything. Christina arrived 15 minutes later, holding Emma's hand. She looked nervous and angry, her jaw set in a hard line. When she saw me standing near the hostess stand, our eyes met. She knew who I was instantly. Rachel Torres? She asked, her voice tight. Christina Valdez, I replied. Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult. Difficult? She let out a bitter laugh. I thought I was married to a single man, I thought. She looked down at her daughter, who was clutching a stuffed rabbit. I thought we were a family. We're both his wives, I said quietly. And we're both his victims. But tonight, that ends. I led Christina to a table tucked in the corner of the main dining room, separate from Eleanor's private party, but with a clear view of the entrance. Patricia had planted a microphone under the table, ready to record everything. At 6 o'clock, Marcus arrived with Eleanor and Valerie. He was laughing at something his mother said, completely oblivious to the trap waiting for him. They were led toward the private dining room in the back. That's when Christina stood up. Marcus, his head whipped around at the sound of her voice. I watched the color drain from his face as he saw Christina standing there with Emma. Then his eyes found me, sitting at the same table, and I saw true fear flash across his face. What are you doing here? He stammered, looking between us. Your mother invited me, I said calmly, standing up. It's her birthday dinner. She invited the whole family, all of it. Eleanor pushed past Marcus, her face twisted in fury. What is the meaning of this? Christina walked forward, Emma now hiding behind her mother's legs. I'm Christina Hendricks. I'm Marcus's wife. Or at least, I thought I was. Until I found out he's already married to her, she pointed at me. The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were staring now, sensing drama. Marcus held up his hands. This is a misunderstanding. Christina, let me explain. Explain what? I cut him off, my voice ringing through the restaurant. Explain how you married her 6 years ago while you were still married to me. Explain how you bought her a house with money stolen from our joint accounts. Explain how you have a 4-year-old daughter that I knew nothing about. You're insane, Marcus hissed, but his voice shook. You're making things up. I pulled out my folder and threw it on the table. Marriage certificates, both of them, property records, bank statements showing $200,000 transferred to your shell company, photos of you with your other family. I have everything, Marcus. Every lie, every secret, every crime. Christina's hand flew to her mouth. $200,000 you stole from your own wife to pay for our life? Eleanor stepped forward, trying to take control. This is absurd. Marcus would never. You knew, I turned on her. You knew from the beginning. You watched him commit bigamy and you covered for him. You told me I wasn't good enough, that I'd failed as a wife. But the only failure here is you as a mother. Valerie spoke up from behind her mother, her voice clear and strong. It's all true, Mom. I knew too, and I'll testify to everything in court. Rachel has witnesses, evidence, everything she needs to put Marcus in prison. Marcus lunged toward me, but Patricia was faster. She stepped between us, her hand on his chest. I wouldn't do that, Mr. Torres. Assault would just be one more charge. Christina walked up to Marcus, tears streaming down her face. Then she slapped him. The sound echoed through the silent restaurant. I loved you, she whispered. Emma loved you. We were real to you, weren't we? But Marcus just stood there, his face red, his hands shaking with impotent rage. He had nothing to say, no explanation that could possibly make this better. The restaurant manager appeared, clearly uncomfortable. Folks, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if this continues. We're done here, I said, picking up my folder. I looked at Marcus one last time. You're being served divorce papers tomorrow. Criminal charges will be filed by the end of the week. I hope your two families were worth destroying your entire life. I walked out with my head held high, Christina and Emma following behind me. The last thing I saw was Marcus collapsing into a chair while his mother stood frozen, finally realizing the magnitude of what was about to happen to her precious son. The legal takedown. The divorce papers were served to Marcus at his office the next morning. According to Diane, he'd tried to refuse them, but the process server was experienced. By noon, Marcus knew exactly how much trouble he was in. I filed for divorce, citing fraud, bigamy, and misappropriation of marital assets. But that was just the civil side. The criminal charges were what would really destroy him. The district attorney's office was very interested in our case. Bigamy wasn't prosecuted often, but when combined with fraud and theft, they saw it as a slam dunk. Within a week, Marcus was arrested at his workplace. His employer, a prestigious accounting firm, immediately suspended him pending investigation. When they discovered he'd been stealing from me, a clear character issue, they fired him on the spot. Christina filed for annulment of her marriage to Marcus, claiming fraud, which was absolutely true. She also joined my civil lawsuit, seeking damages for the emotional distress and the years she'd spent in a fraudulent marriage. Together, we made a formidable team. The legal discovery process revealed even more than I'd imagined. Marcus had 3 credit cards I didn't know about, all maxed out funding his double life. He had a safety deposit box containing cash and jewelry he'd hidden from both of us. He'd even taken out a life insurance policy where Christina was the beneficiary, not me. But my favorite discovery was what we found about Eleanor. She'd been hiding money for Marcus, over $50,000 in a savings account in her name that she'd borrowed from her retirement fund to help him when things got tight with Christina. That money had originally come from our joint accounts, which Marcus had secretly transferred to his mother. Diane filed a separate lawsuit against Eleanor for conspiracy and aiding fraud. At first, Eleanor tried to fight it, hiring her own attorney. But when Valerie testified in a deposition about everything she'd witnessed, including conversations where Eleanor actively encouraged Marcus to keep lying, Eleanor's lawyer advised her to settle. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the courtroom every single day, watching Marcus squirm under questioning. Christina sat beside me, and sometimes we held hands. We'd become unlikely allies, united by our shared betrayal. The prosecution called witness after witness. Bank managers who confirmed the suspicious transfers. The clerk who'd processed Marcus's marriage license to Christina under a false name. Neighbors from Maple Street who testified they'd seen Marcus coming and going for years. And finally, Valerie, who tearfully recounted everything Marcus had told her about his backup plan. Marcus's attorney tried to paint him as a man caught between two loves, someone who'd made mistakes but didn't deserve prison. The jury wasn't buying it. The verdict came down on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts: bigamy, fraud, theft from marital assets. The judge sentenced Marcus to 18 months in prison, followed by 5 years probation. He'd also have to pay restitution to both Christina and me, plus court costs and fines. As they led him away in handcuffs, Marcus finally looked at me. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. But I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just emptiness where 8 years of love used to be. The civil suits settled shortly after. Eleanor lost her house, trying to pay her portion of the settlement and legal fees. Marcus's retirement account, the one he'd been so proud of, was divided between Christina and me. The house on Maple Street was sold, and the proceeds were split 3 ways to help Christina, Emma, and me rebuild our lives. In the end, I was awarded 70% of all marital assets, including what remained after Marcus's spending spree. It wasn't about the money, though. It was about justice. It was about making sure he understood that actions have consequences. Rebuilding. From the ashes, 6 months after Marcus went to prison, I sold the house where we'd lived together. I couldn't stand to wake up in that bedroom anymore, remembering all the mornings I'd kissed him goodbye while he drove off to his other life. I moved to Portland, Oregon, a place I'd always wanted to visit, but Marcus had never wanted to go. I got a job at a dental practice near the waterfront, where the dentist was kind and the staff welcomed me without knowing my history. Starting over in a new city felt like breathing fresh air after years underground. Christina and I stayed in touch. She'd moved back in with her parents in California, focusing on raising Emma and rebuilding her life. We texted occasionally, usually when one of us was having a hard day. There was something strangely comforting about talking to the only other person who truly understood what Marcus had taken from us. "I started therapy," Christina texted me one afternoon. "Emma too. She keeps asking why Daddy doesn't come around anymore." "What do you tell her?" I texted back. "The truth, in kid terms, that Daddy made bad choices and has to face consequences. My therapist says honesty is better than making up stories." "That's brave. How are you holding up?" "Some days are good. Some days I want to throw things. But we're surviving. You?" "Same. Surviving is enough for now." 3 months after moving to Portland, I started a support group for women who'd experienced betrayal in their marriages. I posted about it in a local Facebook group, expecting maybe 3 or 4 people to show up. 27 women came to the first meeting. We met in the community room of a library every Thursday evening. The women who came had stories that broke my heart. Affairs, financial abuse, secret families, lies that had lasted decades. I shared my story, and others shared theirs. We cried together, we raged together, and slowly, we healed together. "You saved my life," one woman told me after a meeting. Her name was Jennifer, and her husband had been living with another woman in a different state for 5 years. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was the only one stupid enough to miss the signs. But hearing your story made me realize I'm not stupid. I'm just human. That's when I realized why I'd survived all of this. Not for revenge, though that had felt good in the moment. Not for money, though financial security helped. I'd survived so I could help other women find their way through the darkness. A year after Marcus went to prison, I got a letter from him. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I worked up the courage to open it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Rachel, I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I need to try. Prison gives you a lot of time to think about your choices. I destroyed 2 families because I was selfish and cowardly. I wanted everything, the stability you gave me and the excitement Christina represented. I convinced myself I could have both without anyone getting hurt. I was wrong about everything. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Christina and Emma deserved better. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I see it clearly now. The man who could lie to you every single day for years, I don't even recognize him anymore. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were never the problem. You were never lacking anything. The problem was always me. I hope you found happiness. You deserve all of it, Marcus." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd feel ready to respond. Maybe I never would. Either way, I'd made peace with the fact that closure doesn't always come from other people. Sometimes you have to create it yourself. That spring, I met someone. His name was David, and he was a teacher at the elementary school next to my dental office. We struck up a conversation in line at a coffee shop, and he made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in over a year. Full disclosure, I told him on our third date. I have serious trust issues. My ex-husband was living a double life for years, and I didn't know. So I'm probably going to ask a lot of questions and need a lot of reassurance, at least at first. David didn't flinch. Full disclosure back. My ex-wife cheated on me with my best friend. So I get it. Trust is earned, not given. I'm okay with that. We took things slowly. He met my support group. I met his friends. He never made me feel crazy for needing transparency, and I tried not to punish him for Marcus's sins. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and real was all I wanted anymore. 2 years after everything fell apart, I was standing in my Portland apartment, a bright, sun-filled space with plants in every window and art on the walls that I'd chosen myself. I was making dinner for David, who was coming over to watch a movie. My phone buzzed with a text from one of the women in my support group, thanking me for helping her leave her abusive husband. I looked around at the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage, and I realized something profound. Marcus hadn't destroyed me. He'd tried, but I'd survived. More than survived, I'd transformed. The betrayal had taught me that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. It taught me that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead us to the best versions of ourselves. It taught me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who show up when everything falls apart. I'd learned to trust my instincts again. I'd learned that loving someone doesn't mean ignoring red flags. I'd learned that closure is something you give yourself, not something someone else can hand you. And I'd learned that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, isn't nearly as powerful as rebuilding your life into something that makes you genuinely happy. Marcus was still in prison, serving out the remainder of his sentence. Eleanor had moved in with a cousin in Arizona after losing her house. Christina had started dating again, and Emma was thriving in kindergarten. Valerie had paid off her debts and moved across the country, cutting ties with her mother and starting fresh. We'd all moved forward in our own ways, carrying our scars but refusing to let them define us. The doorbell rang, and I set down my wine glass to answer it. David stood there with flowers and that easy smile that had first caught my attention. "These are for you," he said, handing me the bouquet. "Also, I brought the documentary you wanted to watch." "You're perfect," I said, and meant it. "Not perfect," he corrected gently. "Just present, just honest, just trying to be worthy of the amazing woman who gave me a chance." As I let him in and we settled onto the couch together, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not the false contentment of ignorance, but the real kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. Marcus had given me 8 years of lies, but in destroying my illusions, he'd accidentally given me something far more valuable: the strength to build a life based on truth, self-respect, and genuine connection. I raised my wine glass in a silent toast to the woman I used to be, the one who'd trusted too easily and ignored her instincts. She'd been broken, but she'd also been brave enough to seek the truth, even when the truth shattered everything. And I raised a glass to the woman I'd become, someone who knew her worth, who helped others find theirs, and who would never again settle for half a life. The moral of my story isn't complicated. Trust your instincts. Believe people when they show you who they are. And remember that the worst betrayals often lead to the greatest transformations. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're truly made of. And what I discovered was this: I was made of steel.